Hi all, it's Jill Sprott with this week's Scrap Your Stash feature. This week I'll be walking you through my approach to misting and masking, both of which will be the foundation for the layout that I create. The layout in question is about Malasada Day, probably one of my favorite days of the whole year. While people all across the world are celebrating Mardi Gras, here in Hawaii we're celebrating Fat Tuesday with what we call Malasada Day. If you know the history behind Fat Tuesday, it's all about using up the fats before Lent begins. Well, the Portuguese community, we use up the fat by cooking malasadas. And so every year, my daughter and we go to Leonard's Bakery, which is in Waikiki, Kamuki area here on island, and we buy a bunch of malasadas, and we eat them all in traffic on the way home. And so I'll walk you through my layout. At the beginning of my process, I tried to select papers that worked well with the colors in the photos. The malasadas themselves were brown, so that was a little tough to work with, but the box from Leonard's Bakery is pink and blue, and so I used that, pink and blue, as my foundational color scheme. The papers from Amy Tangerine, Dear Lizzie, and Crepe Paper were perfect for this. The new lines are full of lots of pink, lots of blue, but also the Crepe Paper line has some really cool paper that has recipes on it, baking recipes, and so I thought that would work really well. I basically just use what I love. And then the foundation, instead of just using plain old cardstock, this pretty painterly paper from Dear Lizzie just stole my heart. I love it. And it looks really good as a background paper, and so I used that here. Although I had lots of choices for letters for this layout, I finally decided on the American Crafts Begonia Thickers. They're not just fun to use because they're thickers, but because they have like a sugary consistency, which I thought would work really well with the malasada idea. For accents, I pulled out again a lot of pink, a lot of blue, but also just accents that would work with this idea of malasada lovin'. And so Chic Tags has a lot of Valentine's Day oriented tags that aren't necessarily just for Valentine's Day. They're actually perfect for any kind of layout that's kind of, lovey-dovey or sweet in nature, whether it's literally sweet or not. I also pulled out some Knock Knock post-it notes that I've been dying to use, and the new freckled fawn wood veneer hearts, which are great. I don't think I can make a layout without adding at least one heart. And then a few accents from the new Dear Lizzie collection, as well as Amy Tangerine's Yes Please line. There's a bunch of crepe paper die cuts that I love, from Maggie Holmes, as well as Studio Calico's mask, which is what I'll be using here as a foundation on this layout. And so the mask itself, if you notice, the circles are a little imperfect. They're kind of lopsided circles, which is exactly what a malasada is. And so I opened the mask, and to prevent a whole lot of blowback from occurring, I missed in a cardboard box. And so I noticed that some of that little pieces within the mask didn't necessarily apply to the layout that I was making. For instance, one of the words said hello, and I didn't want it to say that. It was an ampersand, so I just took it out. Really easy. But one thing I realized was that because the mask was much smaller than the actual background paper that I would be using, I knew that when I misted over it, the edges would show. But rather than show a square within a square, I put scrap paper all around it so that when I misted, those edges wouldn't be too apparent. And so I misted one side using Color Shine Mist in Tropicana Teal, and the other side in Primrose, two colors that I love. So if you notice, when I remove the scrap paper, you can't really see that sort of square within a square. There's a few fine edges, but overall, I think it worked really well. And once it dried, I decided where to put my photos. So you can see kind of a mixing, matching process. I finally decided to put them at the bottom of the layout because that's kind of in line with the rule of thirds, right? That line that kind of intersects in the bottom third, or that runs across the bottom third, is where I align the photos. I used this paper from Maggie Holmes from Crepe Paper. It's kind of mod, kind of funky for this particular layout, but as a photo mat, I thought it was really pretty because it has pinks and blues in the background. I matted the second photo, the one of the malasadas, on another sheet of crepe paper, pattern paper, and this one was Maggie Holmes cutouts, lots of different patterns. I love the sort of blue, it's almost like a star pattern. I thought it would be really neat to put on the paper here just because of that interplay of pink and blue, pink and blue. So while the Leonard's Bakery photo is predominantly pink in its background, the other one is more blue. I love the mask as is, but I thought of kind of enhancing a few of the circles by adding some punched pattern circles. And so those punch pattern circles are mainly from the Dear Lizzie and Amy Tangerine collections. That little text paper one that I just added is actually an excerpt from that recipe paper that I mentioned from Crate Paper. It has again baking recipes, and so you can see the ingredients, which are really similar to the same, to the ingredients that are used in malasadas. After adding those pattern circles to the layout, I sewed straight across in horizontal lines just to kind of unify the design. I didn't do it in the very last row of circles just because it would be covered by the photos, but the other circles are all unified through machine stitching. One of Amy Tangerine's new pattern papers from the Yes Please collection includes this gray card that says, "This stuff matters," which I know probably should be reserved for, the poignant layouts of our lives. But I thought it would be really funny to work it in here as well, because what's Malasada Day without malasadas, right? This stuff matters. It actually makes a huge difference for me every Mardi Gras. They're so good. A page that I create, I think, always has to have layers. I tried to really keep it simple here on this layout compared to what I usually do, but still, layers. I needed them. And so I started to build underneath the two photos, tucking in odds and ends, papers and accents along the way. So the vellum paper comes from Dear Lizzie, and that pink doily that you saw was a little too huge to just put there on the sheet. It would have overwhelmed it, but I trimmed it in half and then tucked it behind the Leonard's Bakery photo. Dear Lizzie has tags that I love. There's lots of different colors here, and there's this kind of ombre tag. And I actually learned the other day that ombre means dark to light, and this one goes light to dark, but still, come on, it's ombre. And so I decided to journal on that. And so I was looking for places to put it. I like a lot of hidden journaling on layouts when there's not much room to just kind of put the journaling on there. And so I decided to tuck it behind the photo, keeping in mind that if I wanted to sew, that I would have to leave kind of or make the photo into a little kind of envelope or pocket, so I could just stick the tag behind it. And so I pulled out tags. This one, for instance, is a Days of the Week tag from Chic Tags. I circled Tuesday since it was Fat Tuesday, Malasada Day, and I tucked it behind a photo. So if you notice, the layers aren't kind of over the layout, they're underneath the existing design of the page. That way they don't overwhelm, because really there's not much room. Visually, the page is sort of complete already. And so it's just a matter of kind of layering smaller elements here and there, tucking them in. In Amy Tangerine's die cuts from the Yes Please collection, there's a word that says today, and rather than use my die cut machine, dust it off and use it, I decided to use the word today, but I trimmed off the TO from day, and so that's going to be part of the Malasada Day title. So then I finally started to adhere the components. The page started to feel a little final to me, and so I used my glue runner to apply adhesive to the back of the different elements of the layout. In adding the second round of stitching to the layout, which is the stitching over the photos, I made sure not to stitch over the very top of the Malasada photo. That way I could tuck the journaling in. Knowing that the journaling tag was eventually going to be tucked behind a photo anyway, I realized that I didn't have to sweat it. I didn't have to worry too much about what the journaling would look like at a glance. And it wasn't just a quality of handwriting issue. Usually when I'm trying to fit in like a precise or finite amount of information, I'll type just because I can control the editing and revising process. When I handwrite journaling, usually it's just more of a go with the flow approach. It really doesn't matter, where I begin or end. So in this case, there wasn't, kind of too much to cover. I didn't have to worry about, kind of a checklist as I was journaling, like I must say this, I must say that. Instead, I just wrote as I would say in a journal. I just talked about how every Mardi Gras, my daughter and I basically gorge ourselves on malasadas, and what a wonderful joy that is. A fattening joy, but a wonderful joy. I'll just say we're celebrating our culture, and that's pretty much where I concluded the journaling. I'm just going to chalk it up to Portuguese heritage and say that it's a pride thing. That's why we eat so many malasadas. With the journaling done and the sewing done, I could finally adhere my title. And so again, I use those sugar-covered thicker stickers. And so since the word day was covered, I added the word Malasada over it. And so I was really nervous at first that this word Malasada, which is really long, might not fit. And so what I did was I took the little letter M and kind of just, put it straight across the page like Malasa, figuring the letters can't get any bigger than the M to kind of just guesstimate, and it fit. I didn't want the title to be so precise, kind of stuffy, since, the day is kind of whimsical. And so if you notice, the title isn't kind of perfectly balanced, perfectly measured, and it doesn't need to be. The word day, rather than just kind of let it lie flat, I decided to use pop dots on the back of it. And so because the letters were kind of narrow, I trimmed the pop dots, one row of them, and used kind of half pop dots on the back. And so after peeling off each little piece, I flipped it over and adhered it to the page. With the basic structure, the journaling, and the title of the page done, it was time for me to adhere all the little accents, the tidbits, that kind of add personality to the page. And so I used a small little tag from Chic Tags that basically says, "You are my favorite," which is my ode to the Malasada. And then I used a wood veneer shape that says love, and I meant it, from Freckled Fawn. I love these little things. I used craft glue on the back of it, and because I know glue can get kind of clumpy, I just used my finger to smooth it over. I also used a flare pin from Dear Lizzie that says loved, and once again, I meant it. There's so much sincerity on this page. And so at that point, it was just adding tiny little bits and pieces, just to kind of, add flavor to the page, I suppose. And so there's these cute little acrylic pieces from Dear Lizzie that I added behind one of the photos, but also kind of clustered together with the flare. And I added a button. And I guess it's kind of a thing with me, the open buttonholes, non-stitched. Sometimes I'm lazy. Like the little blue button I stuffed next to XOXO doesn't have any stitching in it, but it's because it can't be seen. But in this case, the button holes had to be stitched. It was kind of a mental thing. And so that was really the last finishing touch for this page, was the threaded button. And there it is, my final layout, ready to go. Malasada Day. Now it's your turn to stop jonesing for malasadas, because I've been doing that the whole time, and actually reach for your masks, reach for your mists, or hunt some down, and get to work. I would love to see what you come up with, so be sure to post your layouts or projects in our gallery, and I'll be taking a look at them. Good luck!